What is good, everybody? I hope everybody is well. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Make sure to hit the thumbs up, the subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. So I've been holding off on this one for a little bit, but it's kind of been on my mind. So I'll talk about it just a little bit. We are going to talk about, why men have left the church. I kind of, was thinking about where I want to go with this, right? My disappointment with the church and all this kind of stuff, right? So we'll talk about all that. So why men have left the church, or at least my opinion. This is my opinion. I haven't done any surveys. I don't think I've ever. I've seen a few videos like this. I haven't watched them, so I try to get my own personal perspective without, the input of other people. So I don't know what they've said, but here's just my own history, my own background, a little bit. So I talked about the strong deacons that were at my church, and I appreciate them and their strength of character, masculinity, and presence, and all this type of stuff. Coincidentally, I watched a video, and I don't know if anybody follows politics, but there's a video about a former state senator from Ohio, Nina Turner, who recently went on some podcast or something and was lambasting the Democratic Party and saying how it emasculates men, and particularly black men, and probably more than likely Hispanic women, Hispanic people as well, Hispanic men. And then there was something else I was watching, and it clipped that particular portion of what I just said about Nina Turner. If I can find it, I'll try to clip it on here.
What's your read on why so many black men, Hispanic voters have found in Trump something to admire, something even to vote for?
Well, Madam Editor, I'm glad you asked me that question. For me, the Democratic Party emasculates black men.
Wow.
And I think Hispanic men probably feel the same way. And I say this because they weaponize identity. When and where we enter, who we are, how we identify is important to who we are, just like our fingerprints. But if you're not going to use my identity to advance a social justice cause, and you're just going to use my identity as a blunt force object, now I got a problem. And so what the Democratic Party does, they put black women on a pedestal and they say, we're the mothers of the movement, or we saved the party. But yet you don't put forth policies that save black babies. You don't put forth policies that deal with the maternal death rate of black women and black babies in the United States of America. You don't do those things that lift and edify. Yes, identity is important. Both parties use it differently. Republicans use it to say that everybody black or brown or of a mixed race is somehow kind of way a DEI hire. They use it to say certain books will be banned. Don't tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how this country was formulated, because you might hurt a white child's feelings by saying that, yeah, chattel slavery existed, and oh, by the way, white powerful folks stole the land from the indigenous people. So all of those things, Chinese Exclusion Act, I mean, we can go down the list. But Democrats use it in a way that alienates other folks, and it offends me. So when I talk to black men across this country, they don't see themselves in this party. It's one thing to recognize the power and prowess of black women and the sacrifices that we make. It is another thing to put us above black men. The black struggle, black men and black women have to be together. We don't have the luxury to be separated, and so I resent the Democratic Party for doing that. And so black men do not see themselves in the party. That bravado, because we got a kind of masculine energy, and masculine energy is not all bad, but the type of bravado that Trump puts forward is still very much rooted in a hierarchical patriarchy, and a lot of men gravitate to that.
And just like the redefining masculinity and all this type of stuff, man. I'm not with that. In fact, if I can find this clip, and I know it's got to be in my history, so I'll definitely look for it. It was talking about redefining men, masculinity, and the Republican Party, I believe it is, something like 55% of men believe that it was essential for men to show some form of masculinity, or masculinity in men was important. And in the more liberal camps, or more democratic ideology camp, it was only 30% of men thought that was important. So anybody doesn't understand why a lot of men, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, are following after guys like Trump is because they exude masculinity. You know, I'm not stumping for Trump or anyone else, but I'm just trying to give some perspective on what manhood looks like, and what, you know, people think about masculinity and manhood and all that. And a lot of people are not with this talk and this what's going on here concerning, you know, what masculinity looks like and all that. So just be aware of that. You know, this new masculinity that people got trying to get us to get used to and all this, man. A lot of dudes are not rocking with that. So masculinity was important for me, for my life. Even though I didn't have a father, I did have strong uncles, did have strong people in my church, deacons in my church, who I could look up to and say, man, I want my life to be like that when I grow up. So why men have left. So I was one of those people, you know, I stayed in the church for a long time. I became a deacon eventually. I was a youth leader and even entered into the ministry for a little bit. Yeah. Doing all the preaching and all that kind of stuff. So one thing I noticed in my time there, particularly as I, you know, you start to, just like anything else, right? You start to figure out the inner workings. I really want to park somewhere else, but you figure out the inner workings, and you start to understand that maybe this isn't for me, because, you know, the things we're talking about, you know, and it's like that in every organization. Every organization, I'm sure, somehow, some way is going to let you down. Is going to present this image that is not going to be lived up to. I got some place to be in 25 minutes. I'm going to try to get through this. Every place is not going to live up to the things you want it to be. Whether it's true as, you know, I was a police department, it's true church, political organizations, right there, even again with the political talk. What's her name? Tulsi Gabbard, who once ran for president of the United States, has been so disillusioned with, you know, the inner workings of the political system, right? Who's running America? I put the screenshot up before. I won't do it again on another thing that I did, but I'm sure if you put in Tulsi Gabbard, and she's now being followed, and when she goes to the airport, you know, because of her speaking out and all this kind of stuff, right? So political games, no matter the organization, can really, you know, they really have an impact. All right. So why men have left the church. So one of the biggest reasons that I think that men left the church is because there was too much, in particular the church that I was going to, too much falling over themselves, too much doting over, too much love bombing of the leadership, in particular the pastor. If you go to a church the type of church that I grew up in, and they were always buying the pastor this and buying the pastor that, and, you know, always some big long week-long celebration of pastors' anniversaries and all this kind of stuff. Guys don't want to see that. Guys don't want to see that. They don't want to see their woman falling all over themselves for somebody else. I remember one time I was at this thing, man. We were trying to get there's a couple stories I'll give. And it was a situation where we were doing the pastor's anniversary type of thing, and we had a banquet. You know, everybody got together and just kind of went to a restaurant. And so it comes time where, you know, we're sitting down eating and start doing these presentations, and presenting the dude with a suit, presenting him with a watch. And the dudes I was sitting with got up and walked out. I'm like, man, I'm understanding like why they left. Like they don't want their hard-earned money that I'm assuming that they're making. I don't know if they're wise. I can't remember some of the wise words, whatever. But they don't want money out of their own home. Let's put it like that. Going out into supporting somebody else who has suits, who has watches, they don't want to see that. So men leave because of that. So you got these super pastor churches where dudes are talking about, you know, their boats and their yachts and their airplanes and their cars that they're buying and the watches that they have and all. They don't want to see that, right? They don't want to see it. I remember one time this, you know, lady. I mean, listen, I'm friends with a lot of these people. I remember one time that, you know, somebody stood up in church and said, you know, you would never see me wear the same clothes twice. What does that do to a single mother, to a poor struggling mother who's making $25,000-$30,000 a year? You know, work picking up extra shifts, driving Ubers to make sure her kids eat, and you're talking about you don't ever have to wear the same clothes. I mean, I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you why men leave. I'm telling you why men leave, right? So those are big reasons. You know, the church was once a staple, in particular in the black community. And the city I grew up in had a bunch of different clubs. There were Albanian clubs and Lithuanian clubs, Italian clubs, and more than one of them in one city or in one, region. Maybe some of them were, adjoining town or something like that. But people from Lithuanian descent or Italian descent and all that. And there was also just other places was the Irish, a couple of Irish bars and stuff. This is where people would go and congregate and, kind of build connections. And, that was the place, church. I don't ever remember seeing an African American club, although we did have certain things, right? We had the International Brotherhood of the Elks or something like that. And of course, churches, right? So, to be a part of these organizations was to be a part of something special and to be something that was a community connection and organizer for when we needed to get things done. And, so I hear when a lot of times ladies, I actually listen to and I hear when the ladies say that we need men who are going to build, protect, and provide, right? We got to show them leadership. And those places that I'm speaking of were avenues which that type of leadership could be displayed, or at least we can make the connections. Hey, listen, I'm a small business owner. I'm trying to look for I'm looking for carpenters or whatever. This is the place where we should have met these type of people, right? Granted, all the hurdles that we've had to deal with, concerning the past of African American people. So what I want to continue to just talk about is just why the men left the church, their disappointment with the leadership, the disappointment with the falling all over themselves, the doting all over themselves, of that type of environment was just not conducive to the growth of masculinity and manhood, right? They just don't want to see that type of stuff every day, all the time, or once a week, or whatever. And then you go more than once a week, right? My mother, growing up, man, coming out of the church world environment, let me put it like that. A lot of times people would say, that people replace one drug with another drug, right? Going from one issue to another. And I think that there's a little bit of truth to that, right? So you gotta, you go from one thing to another thing, right? Really without establishing yourself as who you are as a person. And one of the biggest things that I had to do when I left the church, right, going from growing up in church to becoming youth leader to becoming a deacon to becoming a minister, is really try to find out who I was. Therefore, I studied psychology. I had to figure out like who I was, where I was going. What do I really think? What do I really believe? I don't have any issue with anyone who goes to church or who has relationship with the Lord and all this kind of thing, or whatever. I mean, it's you do you. Whatever gets you up in the morning, whatever feeds your soul, whatever feeds your spirit, whatever helps you become the best version of yourself, I say embrace it and go for it. As long, obviously, as it's not, you're not becoming a zealot and willing to hurt other people for your faith and all that kind of stuff. So as long as you're doing that, you and I are cool. So that's a big reason why people left the church. Another one was, just a lack of doing anything, right? Just a lack of doing anything. I told a story before about how I tried to set up a scholarship for, people my age at the time. I was a little older, 19, 20 maybe. And, I'm trying to set up scholarships so people who coming up after me could go, and I just got resistance from it. I was so disappointed. That actually made me leave from one church to go to another church. I'm like, I got to be a part of something, right? So again, your church should have something that is community-centered, community-oriented, right? Homework helps. Scholarships for kids going to school. Reading programs. Motherly education, right? How to be a mother, right? A lot of these single mothers a lot of us don't know what we're doing wrong, right? Different parenting techniques and stuff, right? If we want to get away from spanking, we got to figure out a different way to educate these kids and get them in line with the program. And a lot of times people do just spank their kids out of frustration, right? They don't know what's better to do, so they need education. So the church ought to be something like that, right? Sexual education, right? That was another thing I wanted to bring up, but I was told don't even talk about it, right? Our sexual education is we don't do it until marriage. Okay, but now we got all these single mothers running around out here. Right? We got these absent fathers, dudes just skipping out, right? Not understanding the game. I think that needs to be also something that is talked about a little bit more. Is understand, guys need to get education as well, as far as how to treat women, but the ladies need to get how to vet different things, and otherwise people make mistakes. If you don't tell them, they're going to make mistakes. I'm loosening out my legs here. If you don't tell them, people are going to make mistakes. So, you got to prepare these kids, and they don't know. And a lot of times the parents don't know. Listen, I'm telling you, a lot of times parents don't know. And I think that people look to church, which I'm not saying is a negative or positive. I'm just saying that people look to church for a lot of different reasons. They look for the social interaction, they look for the spiritual uplift, and they look for a lot of times some type of social education. Sometimes people don't know, this sounds crazy, but a lot of times people don't know basic hygiene. A lot of times people don't know, to put lotion on. People don't know basic things. A lot of times people are too poor to do it. And so a lot of times people are missing out on so many things, and the church could be and should be a place where people get what they actually need. And not only spiritually uplifting, because that makes you feel good for today, but you need something that's really going to sustain you and carry you through. And sometimes that comes through education, and that education could be a social, hygienic, social interaction and social education, right? So but that has to be a focus. So I think that's another big reason why a lot of men left, because they wanted something more, something bigger than just running around the church and just jumping around. That's the type of environment that I came from, right? The whole Pentecostal type of thing. But what happens when you go home, and you go home and you still gotta deal with your husband, deal with your spouse, deal with your kids, and you got to deal, and how do you interact and talk to their teachers when your kids are failing school and you think they should be passing or whatever, right? So a lot of basic skills should be developed in other places. Community standards, right? What are the community standards that people have, right? So those can be established by living in the community. The police department, here's a history lesson for you. The police department was really the result of multiple police department, as we know it, I should say, are really the culmination of multiple cultures coming together when different avenues of respectability, and, for lack of a better term, punishment wasn't working, right? So one social stigma or one community, the way that they would punish their people would be by, let's just say, maybe a fine. Somebody else was, total, I don't want to say castigation, but total, we just neglect that person. We stop talking to this person for maybe a month or so. All these different communities, you got to figure out a way to get them to all work together, because one form of punishment, one form of social control isn't worth working with another one. So therefore, the police had to be established, and there was a slow. I'm giving a very, very brief history here. So therefore, police departments were established because we had to develop one systemic way of, for lack of a better term, controlling the population, to making sure that we're all on the same court and all on the same page. So that was essentially what it was. I mean, there's a little bit more to it with the evolution of the night watchmen, slave patrols, and all that kind of stuff. But that is a component of it. So when you don't have that controlling factor, right? When you don't have this one community standard, then a lot of things just fall apart. So a lot of times the churches, they just don't have that. They just don't have this community standard, right? They let the community standard down, and they replaced it with monetary goals. Monetary, everything's about money, right? We gotta collect all this money, as I said, for the pastor. We gotta, listen, man. I mean, a lot of stuff, man, was just not right, man. I remember we used to go to this hot church. Every summer. It was like a big congregation of all the different churches within our jurisdiction would come to this one big huge church, and they didn't have any air conditioning. And they took up an offering to get air conditioning in church. So we're talking about this, and I'm talking to somebody after the church service, She said, they've been taking offerings for that since the 1970s. Right? So and they just, people just doing wrong with the money. Nobody's going to continue to want to give, to be a part of that organization, who don't have any community standards, who don't have any ethics or morals or values, and just stealing the money and all. So you wonder where the men are at, right? Why they're running out to these other things, and why they're on YouTube, and why they're going to the red pill space. Because everybody, I think, to some degree, wants some type of accountability, leadership thing to focus on, thing to go towards, word it how you want. And so, if you don't give some people something positive, then they'll go to all these other things. I'm not saying all the red pill space is negative, because I certainly don't think that it is. I think it could be a good thing. But when you see people going down the wrong path, you got to be very, very careful with that. You got to be very careful with that. So, listen, man. This is where the men are at, and if you don't give them something positive to do, between being faithful and held accountable with your money, being everything can't be about the pastor, falling all over the pastor. Everything can't be, I remember one time, man. I'm hesitant to tell these stories because I know if people watch me that they'll know. I remember one time, and there was a friend of mine, man. He was having car trouble, and I was bringing this dude to work. I was personally getting up. I was working third shift. I was tired. But he was my boy, right? He's my man. I'm gonna bring this dude to work. This dude, now we were both members of the quote unquote elders council at the church. Elders council took a vote to make sure that the pastor had a new car. This dude needed a car. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and I'm quite sure other people in the church, we have to be very, very more mindful about what we're doing, and how we're giving our money. And you should be a good steward of your money. And this is why I'm answering the question why men are leaving or have left the church, and because there's been a lack of leadership, lack of accountability, lack of transparency, lack of trust, lack of and not even to mention now how many times people are sleeping. These preachers are sleeping with the members. A friend of mine was talking to a young girl he's trying to get to know. He's talking to her on the phone, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. He calls me the next morning. He's talking to the girl, the pastor of the church. This is a pastor or assistant pastor. One of them shows up 1:30 in the morning. She gets off the phone with him. What you do? I said, dude, you need to leave this chick alone. It's obviously his piece. So it's obvious. It's obviously his piece. It's obviously not the first time. She's obviously expecting him. She got off the phone and didn't call you back. What are we talking about here? And sometimes I think that, you can grow up in a bubble. You can grow up in a bubble, not thinking that, okay, it's not really my situation, maybe what I'm seeing isn't really, what you're seeing is right. What you're seeing is right, So, and listen, if you grew up in church, you've heard the stories about so-and-so turning up pregnant. This person belongs to that deacon. This person belongs to this deaconess. This person is doing this one. We all, the stories, right? So men are just sick of that, right? Particularly if you try to do the right thing, you really actually believe what we should be living, then you're not going to want that type of stuff, energy in your atmosphere. You're not going to want that. You're not going to want to entertain that. You're not going to want your woman, your wife, your girlfriend, your spouse, your fiance, whatever, going to church and dealing with people who are doing this. I wouldn't go to church where the pastor sleeping around and all that. I wouldn't go to that church. I wouldn't leave that church. Listen, it's not just. There was another time. I have tons of stories. I'm sure if you go to church, you've heard all these stories. You know them all. There was I was dating this young girl. I was a young guy at the time, 21, 22ish, dating a young girl. And we were supposed to go out after Friday. Now, again, I grew up in church, right? So like we had church on Friday night, so I'm gonna meet her. I'm gonna meet her after church. I'm gonna meet her after church, right? She's gonna meet me after church. So now church is over. I mean, I'm calling her like it was before text messages. So I'm calling her before, like, I don't know what the time was, 9:30, 10 o'clock. She's like, oh, listen, my pastor's going out of town, and a bunch of us are over here packing her bags. So I'm like, you're packing your pastor's bag? Is there something wrong with her hand? I'm thinking this, right? I didn't say it, but I'm like, is something wrong with her hands? So then I call back like an hour later, an hour and a half later. You're like, okay, we still going out? We still hanging out or whatever? Like, oh, we're still here. We're having a good time. So you as a man become secondary to the whims of somebody else, and nobody wants to deal with that. No, listen, let me tell you something. No man worth his salt is going to want to deal with that type of environment where you come second, to that type of stuff. Particularly when you're talking about we're dating with intention, right? We're two young people in the church, right? We should be dating, trying to get to know each other so we can get married. That should be the intention. But if I come second to that tells me, and all that told me was that if we continue down this road, I would always be second. I would never ever be the primary person in her life. I would always be somebody who, if the pastor needed this, that, and the other, or pastor said this, or we're home watching a movie and the pastor said this, and then you got to get up and go. And that was not something, even at that young age, I understood. I can't be around that. I can't be around that. I got to be number one. While I may not have been able to verbalize it to the ability that I can now, but that was my thought process. I'm like, I'm not dealing with that. I might have to finish this a little bit later. All right, so I'm back here. I'm going to finish this off. Not much more to say about this, why men have left the church. But I've heard men say that church has become a place that has been very, I guess, I don't want to say woman-centric, whatever that would mean. I'm not there, so I don't know. I'm just kind of repeating what other people have said. And, I don't know what that would mean to certain people and all that. But I do think that there is a need for masculine presence, and there has been a severe lack of masculine presence from what I've heard. And I left church more than 20 years ago. Roughly 20 years ago. Stopped going. And I can't say that was one of the reasons that I left. It was more about the focus, the community activities. There was a lot of deference given to different pastors and things like that. So those are some of the reasons. But I don't know specifically what people are saying when they don't see masculine presence and all that. So I can't speak to that, but I'm just telling you what people have heard. I haven't seen it, so whatever they mean when they say that, I don't know. But I think that there has been a co-opting by society that masculinity has been a bad thing. We need to get away from that. It's been toxic and all this type of stuff, right? So, I'm not in those camps of thought and all that. So those are just some of my thoughts about what that is. So listen, if you want to bring men back to the church, I definitely think you need to create a space for men, for masculinity to be praised, to be appreciated, and to be sought after. Men need leadership. I think that you gotta focus on community activities, right? Schools, and place for men to be men, right? Fishing trips and all this kind of stuff, and it has to be more. You have to think more than kingdom type work. And here's what I mean by that. I think I've kind of articulated that. So we had a men's group one time. We had a bunch of different men who had joined the church, right? So the pastor of the church comes to us, man, who's in the church. He's like, oh, guys, get these guys, before, get them and let's put them to work. Let's give them something to do, this, that, and the other. And then, the leader of the church at the time, the leader of the men's group at the time, went to them and was talking, we want to be able to get the pastor this anytime he wants it. The pastor needs this. He's doing the same thing that I just talked about. Now imagine a strong, manly man who more than likely was looking for a place to get, whatever spiritual needs met, or maybe he went because his girl was there, his wife was there, maybe he's looking for a wife, whatever reason or rationale that they were going there for. And all this, and the leader of the men's group, who's talking to us after church, right? Hey, stay 10 minutes, give us 10 minutes of your time, all these new men in the church where we want to talk to you. And he starts talking about giving money and buying the pastor suits whenever he needs it. The pastor needs to go take a plane. Us men need to be able to, all this stuff that men don't want to hear. And I can't understand why he didn't want to. I couldn't understand it. And listen, I spoke up. Like, they don't want to hear this. They want to know how to be men. They want to know how to lead their homes and lead their families. Some of these dudes want jobs. They want to be able to create their own businesses, right? All the stuff that is going on that we talk about, not only in this channel, but just in other so quote unquote red space channels, right? Men need to be able to do something, right? Let's give them purpose. Let's give them something. And it's just completely missing that point. It wasn't long before the men stopped coming. It wasn't long before the men stopped coming because they weren't getting. It's great to give them advice about relationship with God, but you got to give them something that's practical in the world. And what we had received at that particular time just wasn't practical. It just wasn't practical. And it was evident that they didn't want to hear it because they stopped coming. And eventually I left too, because I can't be a part of this. I can't be a part of something that isn't going to help our young boys get to the place we need to be. Isn't going to help. I just couldn't be a part of that. I just couldn't be a part of that anymore. So those are just some of the reasons, right? So you got to go to a church that's going to be not only kingdom oriented, but so-called. And I'm not advocating for people to go to church, stay home. I'm just saying, to answer the question why men stopped, these are some of the reasons why they stopped. So, what I'm saying is if you want men to come back to the church, then you have to give them something more than just shouting and praise and worship and Sunday school messages. You got to give them something that they could gravitate to, hold on to, and then take with them on their everyday journey and everyday life, and make it reasonable and practical. And then they have to be the kings of the castle, and the pastor should not be the be-all, end-all. And too many people become, in love with celebrities. Too many, in particular, too many ladies become too in love with the celebrities. You want to marry the pastor, you want to follow the pastor around. And this could be true of the women, right? Because the story I told about the girl that I was seeing, it was a woman pastor, right? So who they were all falling over. So if you can fall in love with a celebrity, male or female, right? So you got to be careful about that kind of stuff. And shame on the woman and the pastor who was allowing that. Listen, it's 11, 12 o'clock at night. You guys need to go home. Either go home and get in the bed, or that's what the pastor should have said. And this was also my thought process. Like, why is she not telling these people to go home and go to bed? These people, I don't know who else was at the house or whatever, helping her do whatever, but I can imagine some of them had husbands or husbands. Why would you keep these people out 11:30 at night? If they're all unmarried, then I don't have an issue with it, right? But me and this girl had plans. So I mean, how you gonna get married if you're not? So, but anyway, so you gotta watch churches that's so much into celebrity, so much into other things. Make sure your church is doing something community oriented. Homework helps, elderly help, feeding people, doing something that's going to advocate for the betterment and improvement of the community. College scholarships, man. You got to do those types of things. So, and create a safe place, if there is such a thing, for masculine presence, leadership type of training for people in the church and all this. So those are just some of my thoughts and my opinions about why men have left the church and what you can do to bring them back. And you got to ask yourself, when you look around your church, if it so behooves you to look around your church and ask yourself, what kind of messages are these men having? And if men are leaving churches and men are leaving universities, then you have to take a look at and see, why they're leaving these different places, and what would bring them back to the universities, what would bring them back to college, to the church, what would bring them back to places where they once were felt complete comfort and being, and now they've left these places. Ask yourself why that is. Is it, and to sum it up, the men are lazy, they don't want to do the work. That's a lazy answer in and of itself. Then they were doing the work before, how these places become hostile, and think about, if I found it and then I put it in here, that the Nina Turner clip about her saying that the Democratic Party has emasculated black men and all that. So anyway, much love and peace, everyone. Let me know your thoughts, your opinion. Hit me in the comment section. Make sure you like the video, rate, and subscribe, all that good stuff.